Welcome to Study Faith with AI, where we use the power of AI to help you explore the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
I'm Meg Jensen.
And I'm Paul Carter.
And we're Google AIs. Whether you're a lifelong member or just starting to learn about the church, we're here to dive deep into its history, beliefs, and culture.
So if you're ready to learn, you're in the right place.
That's right.
Let's get started. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be tackling a pretty central topic to Mormonism.
Yeah.
Joseph Smith's abilities as a translator.
Okay.
We've got 6 specific cases that we're going to look at, almost like a credibility test. And think of it as us piecing together like a puzzle, one translation at a time.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think some of these pieces of the puzzle might surprise you.
Oh, yeah.
We're looking at sources from early Mormon publications all the way to recent academic research. So we're going to be drawing on a really wide range of perspectives.
Got it.
Yeah.
And, it's worth acknowledging that this can be a sensitive topic for a lot of people.
Right.
So we're going to just let the evidence speak for itself.
Absolutely.
And try to steer clear of any personal opinions or judgments.
Right. Our goal is to present, the information in as objective a way as possible.
Okay.
And let you, the listener, draw your own conclusions.
So starting with the foundation of the Mormon faith, the Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith claimed to have translated it from this ancient language called Reformed Egyptian.
Right.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The only surviving examples of this language are some characters that Joseph Smith himself copied down. And they bear, when you look at them closely, a striking resemblance to the English alphabet.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable.
Yeah.
Every single letter and number in the English alphabet can be found in those characters.
It's almost like someone just took the English alphabet and, I don't know, just stylized it to look more ancient or something.
They actually made it more exotic or something. Yeah, it raises questions for sure. And it's even more intriguing when you consider that the church itself has chosen to move away from those characters in recent years.
Wow.
In their now, video series, they created new symbols for Reformed Egyptian that look more like traditional Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Why would they do that? It's almost like they're, saying that the original characters, weren't actually what they claimed to be.
Yeah, that's one possible interpretation for sure.
Yeah.
But let's move on to another one of Joseph Smith's translation projects.
Okay.
The Joseph Smith translation of the Bible, also known as the JST.
Oh, yeah.
This is where he revised the King James Version, claiming to restore plain and precious truths that had been lost in previous translations.
So big changes to the Bible, right?
Yes. Quite significant changes in some places.
Wow.
While some people see this as proof of his prophetic abilities, there's a recent study from BYU that complicates things a little bit.
Okay.
It found that hundreds of passages in the JST were directly borrowed from a popular Bible commentary.
Really?
At the time called Adam Clarke's commentary.
Now, hold on. Are we talking about plagiarism here?
Well, plagiarism is a strong word.
Okay.
But the similarities are undeniable.
So it raises questions about, the originality of the JST.
Yeah.
Was it divine revelation as claimed?
Yeah.
Or was it, heavily influenced by this existing scholarship?
And how does that impact our understanding of Mormon doctrine?
Yeah.
Like, if some of those restored truths actually came from this Methodist scholar?
Right. It's definitely something to consider.
Yeah.
And it leads us to another translation project that's caused a lot of debate.
Okay.
The Book of Abraham. Joseph Smith claimed to have translated this book from Egyptian papyri that he acquired.
So actual physical Egyptian artifacts this time?
Yes, but there's a big problem.
Okay.
Modern Egyptologists have definitively said that those papyri are not what Joseph Smith claimed they were.
Oh, really?
They're actually common funeral documents, the kind you would find buried with Egyptian mummies, and they date back centuries after Abraham would have even lived. So not only are they not about Abraham, but they're from the wrong time period.
Exactly. And it gets worse.
Okay.
The papyri don't even mention Abraham's name.
Wow.
Not even once.
You would think if they were a record of his life, they would, right?
You would think so, yeah. And there's one more detail that makes this whole thing even more problematic.
Okay.
In the Book of Abraham, there's an illustration called Facsimile 3.
Okay.
Which depicts Egyptian characters. And Joseph Smith provided translations for those characters, but they're completely wrong.
Like he couldn't even get a few characters right.
Not in this instance, no.
Wow.
He even misidentified female figures as male pharaohs.
So if you couldn't even translate those simple characters,
right,
how could he possibly translate a whole book from Egyptian?
Yeah, that's a valid question. And it really gets to the heart of this credibility test we're doing here.
Yeah.
We're starting to see a pattern emerge.
Yeah.
And it's one that raises some serious concerns about the legitimacy of these translated works.
And it's really interesting what the church has said about all of this.
Yes, they've had to grapple with these issues publicly in their Gospel Topics essays on the Book of Abraham. They acknowledge that the papyri have nothing to do with Abraham.
They admit that.
They even admit that none of the characters on the fragments mention his name or any of the events recorded in the book.
So they're admitting that Joseph Smith got it wrong.
Well, they're not using that language, but they're acknowledging a significant discrepancy between what he claimed and what the evidence shows.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah, it raises some pretty profound questions about the source of his revelations and the accuracy of his translations.
Right.
If he could make such, fundamental errors, what does that say about his prophetic claims?
This is getting pretty heavy. But we've got a couple more translations to unpack, and I feel like it's only going to get more complicated.
Okay.
So let's move on to this claim that Joseph Smith could speak the pure Adamic language.
Right, the language of Adam and Eve.
Yeah, the very first humans.
Yes, he even provided translations for words like amen and son of God in this ancient tongue.
It sounds pretty incredible being able to speak the language of the Garden of Eden.
It does sound extraordinary.
Yeah.
But the translations themselves are surprisingly straightforward.
Oh, really?
They're basically just modified English words.
So instead of some like really elaborate, ancient sounding language, it's just English with a little twist.
Essentially, yeah.
That doesn't sound very pure or Adamic.
It does seem rather simplistic, especially compared to the complexity of other ancient languages.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if he was really like tapping into this ancient divine language or if he was just drawing from what he already knew.
Yeah, and that's a question that applies to all of his translation work, doesn't it? I mean, were these truly divine revelations, or was there something else going on?
Okay, yeah, I'm really starting to see the credibility test angle.
Yeah.
Like each of these translations has these inconsistencies that make you really question where he's getting his knowledge.
Exactly. And we have two more cases to examine, each with its own set of challenges.
Absolutely. Let's see what other pieces we can fit into this puzzle.
Okay, so next up, we have the Kinderhook Plates.
Okay.
These were a set of 6 kind of bell-shaped plates that were supposedly discovered in 1843.
Wow, imagine finding like ancient artifacts just lying around in a mound in Illinois.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, they caused quite a stir, and Joseph Smith, never one to shy away from a translation challenge, examined them and produced a partial translation.
Okay.
He declared that they contained the history of a descendant of Ham, a figure from the book of Genesis.
Okay.
So initially these plates were seen as kind of, confirmation of his ability to translate ancient records.
Yeah, another point in his favor.
Right. But there's a twist. Decades later, it was revealed that the Kinderhook plates were a hoax.
A hoax?
Deliberately created to test Joseph Smith's abilities.
So someone just made fake plates to see if he would fall for it?
That's exactly what happened.
Wow.
And to make matters worse, the church defended the authenticity of these plates for years.
Oh, wow.
Even after the hoaxers came forward and admitted their deception.
So not only did he get fooled, but the church doubled down.
Yeah, it certainly raises questions about their commitment to truth and transparency.
Yeah.
It wasn't until 1980
wow.
when scientific testing was done on the plates that the church finally acknowledged the hoax.
Why hold on to that narrative for so long?
It does make you think, doesn't it? It underscores the importance of critical thinking and questioning.
Yeah.
Even those things that are presented as, absolute truth.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we should always be willing to re-examine our beliefs in light of new evidence, even if it's uncomfortable or challenges, long-held assumptions.
That's a good reminder for all of us, I think.
Okay, so let's move on to our final case study for our credibility test.
Right.
The Lost Writings of John.
This is the material found in D&C 93, right?
Correct. Oh. So JST Smith presents this revelation that he claims contains lost writings from the author of the Gospel of John. Right. And at first glance, the language and style do seem very, very similar to the Gospel of John.
Yeah, I remember reading that and thinking, oh, this does sound like John.
Right. But upon closer examination, there are some significant problems. These lost writings actually contradict the actual Gospel of John in several key ways.
Wow.
The theology presented in this revelation clashes with the established beliefs and teachings of the author of John.
So it's like he's putting words in John's mouth that John wouldn't have actually said.
That's one way to put it.
Wow.
And it raises a very important question. Was Joseph Smith really revealing lost scriptures? Or was he perhaps unconsciously reinterpreting existing scriptures through the lens of his own, 19th century understanding?
That's a pretty big question.
It is.
And I think it gets to the heart of this whole thing about his translations. If he was prone to these kinds of inconsistencies and reinterpretations, can we really trust that any of his translations are accurate reflections of ancient texts?
And that's the crux of the matter, isn't it? It's one thing to make, minor errors.
Right.
But when we see this consistent pattern of discrepancies, contradictions, and even outright fabrications, it becomes much harder to defend the authenticity and reliability of these translations.
Yeah, this credibility test has turned up some pretty damning evidence.
It has.
And I imagine it's going to be really difficult for some listeners to reconcile this with their faith.
I understand that. It's a lot to process.
It is.
But remember, our goal here is not to attack anyone's beliefs or tell them what to think.
No.
We're simply presenting the evidence and allowing you to draw your own conclusions.
Exactly. We're just trying to make sense of the complexities surrounding Joseph Smith and his legacy. And I think it's important to acknowledge that this is an ongoing conversation.
Right.
This isn't a debate with a clear winner or loser.
Absolutely. There are multiple perspectives on these issues, and it's important to engage with them all respectfully and thoughtfully.
Okay, so we've examined these 6 cases where his translations have been called into question. What does it all mean?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Right.
These are complicated issues with profound implications for believers and truth seekers alike.
Right.
I think perhaps the most important thing is to be willing to ask difficult questions.
Yeah.
To challenge our own assumptions and to be open to new information, even if it makes us uncomfortable.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, the pursuit of truth should be more important than protecting any particular narrative thought system.
And that brings us to a crucial point.
Okay.
What does all of this mean for truth seekers?
Yeah.
Both within and outside of Mormonism.
Right.
What are we supposed to do with this information?
It's one thing to lay out the evidence.
Yeah.
But it's another thing entirely to grapple with the implications, especially for those who have, built their lives around these teachings.
Right, and that's what we'll be exploring in part 3.
Okay. We've spent this deep dive, uncovering some pretty significant problems with Joseph Smith's translations. And it's left us with a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
It is.
We've looked at the Book of Mormon, the Book of Mormon Characters, the Book of Abraham, the JST Bible, even his claims about the Adamic Language, and the Kinderhook Plates, and in each instance the evidence raises questions about the accuracy and authenticity of his claims.
And I think it's fair to say that for some listeners this might be really challenging to their faith.
Yeah, absolutely.
What What do you say to those who are feeling like
Right.
conflicted or even disillusioned right now?
First of all, I'd say it's completely normal to feel that way.
Yeah.
These are not easy things to hear,
Right.
especially if your whole worldview is based on the assumption that he was, a divinely inspired prophet.
Right.
So it's okay to feel confused,
Yeah.
angry, even betrayed.
Yeah, it's like having the rug pulled out from under you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to allow yourself to grieve that loss of certainty. Don't try to force yourself to feel a certain way or
Right.
to come up with answers right away.
Give yourself time.
Yeah, give yourself time and space to
Yeah.
process all of this.
And remember, you're not alone.
Right, exactly.
Like a lot of people have gone through this,
Yeah.
you know.
Many people have gone through this process of questioning and doubting.
Yeah.
And there are resources available to support you.
Absolutely. There are like online communities, support groups, even therapists who specialize in this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So you don't have to go through this alone.
And it's important to remember that there's no right or wrong way
Right.
to go through this.
Okay.
Some people might find that their faith deepens
Yeah.
as they grapple with these challenges.
Okay.
Others might choose to, leave the church altogether,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah. What matters most is that you're honest with yourself,
Right.
and that you find a path that feels authentic to you.
I think it's crucial to remember that even if you have doubts about his translations, it doesn't mean that everything he taught was wrong,
Right.
or that there's no value in the Mormon tradition.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can kind of separate the man from the message,
Right.
so to speak.
Exactly. You can appreciate the community,
Okay.
the values,
Yeah.
the sense of belonging
Yeah.
that Mormonism provides
Right.
without necessarily accepting everything that he claimed.
So it's about taking ownership of your faith and
Right.
and deciding what parts of it,
Yeah.
resonate with you,
Yeah.
and what parts you might need to let go of.
Precisely. And that process of discernment is ultimately a journey of
Yeah.
growth and self-discovery.
Okay.
It's about figuring out what you believe
Yeah.
and why you believe it.
So what advice would you give to truth seekers who are trying to make sense of all this? Like, what are some steps they can take?
I think the first step is to educate yourself.
Okay.
Don't rely solely on what you've been taught in church.
Okay.
Read widely, explore different perspectives.
Right.
And be willing to engage with challenging information.
There's so many resources available now.
Yeah.
Both from believing and non-believing scholars.
Right.
It's fascinating to see how these different perspectives like interact with the same events
Yeah.
and come to such different conclusions.
It's a reminder that history is often messy and complicated.
It is.
And there's rarely a single
Yeah.
definitive interpretation of events.
Right. It's about looking at the evidence,
Yeah.
considering different viewpoints,
Right.
and forming your own informed conclusion.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions, even
Right.
if they seem, uncomfortable or challenging.
Yeah.
Seek out people who can engage in respectful dialogue.
Right.
Who are willing to listen to your concerns and share their own perspectives.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about
Right.
Joseph Smith or the history of Mormonism.
Yeah.
It's about like the nature of truth,
Yeah.
the role of faith, and
What?
and our individual search for meaning and purpose.
And that search is an ongoing process.
Yeah.
It's not about arriving at a final destination,
Right.
but about embracing the journey
Yeah.
of exploration and discovery.
Well said. I think that's a powerful message for all of us,
Yeah.
regardless of our beliefs or background.
So keep searching,
Yeah.
keep questioning,
Keep diving deep.
keep diving deep. The truth is out there waiting to be discovered.
We'll be here with you every step of the way,
Yeah.
exploring these fascinating and sometimes challenging depths of knowledge and understanding.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.
If you find value in this exploration, please like, share, follow,
and consider becoming a subscriber. Your contributions help keep these conversations going and allows us to maintain the highest quality production. You can find all the details at studyfaithwithai.com. Thank you for being part of this journey.